Hello. We are starting now the second unit of the fourth section. This unit is called Valuation Methods 1. So it will be the first one of the two units dedicated to valuation methods. In this unit, we will focus on market data. So from the unit before the previous unit, we saw that for use values, we might have market information, either prices and cost or reviewed preference. And for the existence value, which is a non-use value, we need to use stated preference methods. So if we relate this to the roadmap in section 2, that section in which we related the natural capital to the benefits to people by way of the ecosystem services, we might say that the provisioning ecosystem services all have a use value. They either, by the way, present or future or optional. The regulation ecosystem services, they have a use value as well, either present, future or optional. The cultural ecosystem services, they might have in some cases use value, and in some other cases they have a non-use value, an existence value. So it means that for the provision ecosystem services, for the regulation ecosystem services, and for some part of the cultural ecosystem services, we might use prices, cost, and revealed preference methods. So methods based on market information. But for some part of the cultural ecosystem services, we might need the stated preference method, which we will also be reviewing soon in the next unit. So this is just an example of the total economic value of the ecosystem services provided by an hectare of tropical forest, just the use value in euros per hectare and year. And there you have in blue the value of some ecosystem services related to provisions, or provision ecosystem services, regulation ecosystem services in green, and recreation, so cultural ecosystem services in pink, with a total of 5,474 euros per hectare. Where does that value come from? Well, for the use values, as we have said, we may use market methods or revealed preference. For non-use values, we should use stated preference. So now we are focusing on the first of these three categories, so market data methods for economic valuation, and we are reviewing three ways to apply these methods. The first one is market prices, the second one avoided cost, the third one replacement cost. So market prices, well, this is probably the most simple and common way to do this valuation. We could assess the value, the economic value of some ecosystem service by just assessing the price of some produce, agricultural produce, the price of wood, timber, the price of meat for the provision of services from reared or wild animals. All this is easy to find in most places of the world, even using computers, so we don't need to go there to know the value of this produce, so it's generally simple to calculate. Some other services can also be valued with market prices, though it's not always so easy. For instance, regulation services related to CO2 capture, they may be calculated using the price of the price or the damage calculated, well, in this case the price of a ton of CO2. Or cultural service may be valued by way of considering the price of entrance tickets or price paid to enjoy some activity in nature. Then we have avoided cost techniques. For instance, we can value the provisioning service of genetic variety by calculating how much we avoid, what is the cost that we avoid by having a higher variety of seeds in the way of, for instance, avoided plagues or avoided loss of harvest, in this case for tomato. We could also value provisioning service of medicinal plants by calculating the avoided cost in terms of days of hospital avoided because of the treatments that we have been able to find using data from, or using the information we have obtained from these medicinal plants. We can also assess the value of regulation services, for instance, related to flood control, by calculating the damage that we avoid by having that vegetation close to the rivers that avoid or prevent in some way, somehow, those floods. And the same we can do for regulation services. We can calculate the value of pollination by calculating the loss in crops for bad pollination, which could be improved, of course, with a higher presence of bees or insects. As regards mangroves, here you have here you have an example. The presence of mangroves provides some benefits to people in the way that the presence of mangroves lower the amount of money they have to spend in order to recover for instance, tidal activity or waves activity. As regards replacement cost, here we are focusing not on the damage we avoid, but on the alternatives we should face if we couldn't count on these ecosystems. So, on these ecosystem services. So, if we didn't have this sort of anti-cancer drug called Taxol, what would we need to do? Maybe invest millions of euros in some other alternative anti-cancer drug. So the replacement cost would be that amount of money. If we didn't have vegetation, then vegetation that would contribute to attenuate this sort of mass movement, what would we have to do? Maybe we should build some embankment. So we should try to have or to count on some human infrastructure would be expensive, and then the money spent in that infrastructure would be the replacement cost for our ecosystem service. Very similar to the case of avalanches. If we did not have trees preventing mass movements, then we might need some embankment, some artificial construction to get the same result. If we didn't have this vegetation alongside the rivers, then we might need again embankments. If we didn't have pollination from bees or insects, we might need some other source of pollination, for instance human pollination, which has been already performed especially in some countries in southeastern Asia. So we would have to replace the services we get from nature with this other activity that would cost us some money, and that amount of money would be the source to calculate the value of the ecosystem service.